Welcome to the Digital Agency Growth Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Englander. Today on the show, I'm very excited to welcome back friend, dare I say, mascot of the show, the great Jon Tsourakis out of Chicago, Illinois. Jon is co-founder, president at Oyova, which is an app and other cool digital stuff development agency. Been at this for a long time. Made Inc. 5,000 times, at least a few times, let's say. Jon, great to have you back.
Dude, thank you for having me, but I love that intro, man. That's solid.
Yeah, man. My pleasure. Great to have you on. So where to start things off? I guess just like you've run this agency for a while, and I'd love to hear, I think we're in a time recording this April 10th, 2025, where people are flipping out, sales cycles are taking longer, tariffs this, AI that. What are you seeing out there, and how do you feel about owning an agency right now?
I think there's always going to be uncertainty in anything. That's how the media makes money. And I think it does make it a lot tougher if you focus on it. I think if you actually are solid in your position, you're confident in what it is that you're selling, that you'll always be able to pierce through. If somebody's going to say that sales cycles are taking longer, that means you need more opportunities. So what are you going to do? Rather than focusing on the negative, you really need to focus on the positive. People say, all right, my advertising isn't working, so you're going to then pull your budget back. I would look at, all right, if everybody else is saying that their advertising isn't working, there's probably going to be everybody else pulling back. How do you then double down? And these are things they've said for over 100 years. I'm not an original thinker in any of this, but people tend to forget that because they let their fear take advantage of the opportunities that they could.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the thing that I have to make myself falsify and then also encourage our clients in our training and so on to falsify is it possible that there's some macro thing happening that is having this direct effect on your revenue? It's like, yes, it's definitely possible, but have you falsified the other most likely culprits? Like, for example, if I look at my sales numbers, do I have the number of calls per week and the number of proposals per month? And have I put in the work to get those calls to the level that I expect to hit a certain close rate based on? If your answer is no, then look at that. Or worse, if your answer is I don't even know what those numbers should be, or I've never done a tracking exercise like that, then what I tend to find is that the macro is just an excuse for you not to have to do the things that you don't want to do a lot of the time.
Yeah, I agree. I think it comes down to people always searching for comfort, and they got a little bit comfortable. The last 12 years, with COVID, the economy was great. So many people got into business that shouldn't have been in business. And that's okay, because if you are continually just trying to have a comfortable position, I'm not saying we shouldn't search for that, you're ultimately going to end up being complacent, and complacency kills. So you need to continually adapt, figure out, all right, what's going on and where are the opportunities? If you want to be a real entrepreneur and business owner, or anybody that wants to perform and succeed, that's how you have to continually look at it. So something I learned early on from a guy that his agency failed. And when I asked him what his failed, and I may have even said this on a previous podcast, he said he didn't get comfortable being uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. You have to find comfort in that. This is always going to suck at some level. How do you just make it the best for you? Where is the opportunity so you can attack?
Yeah, I love that you hit on that. There's so much to dig into there. It's funny because in the early days of starting a business, and it took a million different twists and turns, that was literally my journal prompt every day. And I actually do have that in there, which is what resistance did you lean into, right? Which is the concept from The War of Art, if you've read that book, which is the thing you don't really want to do. And there's a couple things that have happened. I think the first thing is it's gotten harder for me to figure out what that resistance is. It's is it getting on a sales call? No. I've done a bazillion sales. Is it public speaking? I don't know. I guess there's some stage I'd be scared to speak on, but generally no. I'm hosting a podcast, and it's not that I'm fearless and there's nothing, but it's harder to identify where that resistance live. So my question is that a familiar problem to you, and how have you dealt with that?
Continually looking for resistance,
or identifying what the resistance is for you at any given point in the company. Yeah.
I think I'm on the other side where I almost enjoy paying too much, and I think some people, if they're not careful, they're going to take too much on, if they're going to suffer the way that I suffer in doing that. So I think resistance is everywhere, right? Especially if you're continually hitting your goals. If you're not continually pushing yourself to the extent or the distance of like just before exhaustion in something, you're really not going to get any gains. And in that, and it doesn't mean you push your people to that. It's just how far can you push yourself in that. And to give some examples, right? I hate social media with a passion, like I do. But now I've committed to posting on LinkedIn, right? And just really like just getting into that pain. Like I don't want to be controlled by an algorithm. Like that's how my mind works. But in doing this, I hired somebody else to help me with it. It didn't work out. So ultimately I was like, okay, this is literally the most painful thing that I can do to myself. And I was like, let's do it. I take no pleasure in it whatsoever. The whole experience does it. But yeah, so that's the new thing, I think, to answer your question that I could take on. The resistance of giving over my focus to something that it ultimately gives me no joy.
Yeah, that's very Protestant of you. No, I don't disagree with that. I think that one thing that's sort of that I found is like this weird counterintuitive resistance is allowing myself the space to actually do the thing that I enjoy, right? Because I've had so much of that idea programmed into me by myself, which is like if I'm not suffering, then I'm not making progress.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's true. Like there's still stuff I don't want to do that needs to get done, like following up with prospects or something like that. But a lot of it is saying like, no, I can like the resistance is giving myself the space to do this creative work that I actually think is fun and not feeling bad about it. Right.
These things could be delegated to somebody else, right? But they're not going to have a sense of to my standard of like that authenticity or genuineness, because I tried it and I didn't like it. And I think ultimately, all right, you got to look at what you value, and that has to be at the height of whatever it is that you're going to look at, right? So I value the authenticity side more than I do the comfort level. Because everything else you build systems for, like the follow-ups that you have. Do you actually have to do that, or could you build a system for that? I don't think somebody can really systematize their authenticity. And if they can, it's having other people write on behalf of them. And then what's really authentic about that? That's essentially just you have ghostwriters. That's not your story.
We were talking about authenticity, and I actually think that's a really good point, because there's so many there's this like market incentive by consultants and by people that have companies like mine to make everything templated, right? But the irony is like whoever had the success enough to build that business did something original, or else it wouldn't have worked that well, right? So I think that's actually the thing that makes creating content sustainable. Because if you're like just creating content to get the leads and to get the conversions, you're going to stick it out for like a week or two, but you're going to quit as soon as the leads don't come in, and they're not going to come in maybe anytime soon, right?
I think along those lines, it's like what story are you telling, right? So if you're a professional, you're a subject matter expert, and you're just doing this for the leads, I think it's something that is going to create burnout. Like you should really be trying to give back, and give back is with your expertise. And authenticity is such an overused word over the last like 15 years. Man, it's just been beat to death. But I think with that though, you're going to see that as a huge differentiator in this AI economy. I was at an innovation talk the other day, and the guy that was speaking said that another person told him the emails that he sent out based on, hey, this is where the location's going to be at, and so on and so forth, should have been automated. And he was kind of beating himself up for it. And I was like, no, man. I was like, that is the differentiator. I saw that as a personal note from you. Because when somebody sends me something, I'll like, you can see the email, right? And tell, even a lot when what you do with your business. If it's sending something through like MailChimp or Pipedrive or whatever application they have, there's not that same connection through it. You're like, okay, yeah, okay, great. You mastered automation. High five, bro. But if somebody's actually going to take the time to write that handwritten note or send you that personal email, those are the touches that have impact. And I don't know what the measurement of it is, but that'll be the differentiator as everybody starts really trying to just robotize. That's not even a freaking word, or, automate essentially everything in this AI economy.
Yeah, it's funny because it's like we're all trying to become good at one martial art. Like, hey, I want to become a good Muay Thai fighter or a good wrestler, a good jiu-jitsu practitioner. But we're all kind of actually doing MMA, right? Where it's like you're not going to have just one solution that's either automated or handwritten, but you're like mixing between the two. And then sometimes like you want one to look like it's the other, and other times the other way around. That might make zero sense, but sometimes like you want it automated because you want that sort of like that energy of like a group. And hey, this is going out to lots of people, and there's scarcity, and there's timeliness and all these different things. And the other times you want it to feel one to one, and you want to say like, I went out of my way to write you this thing. So I think it's kind of a mix, and we're using that in our strategy a lot now because we're doing a lot of like workshops and that sort of thing where we have, the mass invites to our whole list. And then there's going to be situations where it's like, hey, John, like you should really come to this. I know that the robots are doing their thing over here, but I'm doing this thing over here. But that other
Yeah.
thing might also be done by robots. They're full of it.
Just in a continual fog where they don't know where they're at. But I think if you're going to call it out, I think that's important because dude, everybody wants to feel special, right?
Yeah.
So when you take the time to make someone feel special, I mean, dude, it's immeasurable. That connection can last through tons of other situations, and that's what we all need is that human connection. So if you're doing that in email or whatever you're doing, I mean, that's what people should really sign up for. Is like, okay, how can they get more of that?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that a lot of where it's funny because we sort of have seen with this trust recession, all of these different channels get so burnt out and people get so skeptical about them. And I think you could probably look at any channel. You probably look at SEO and it's harder to rank, ad spend and ads cost more. We're in the world of outbound where you used to be able to like do these cold campaigns and you do them the right way and you get meetings all the time. And you still can, but it's gotten harder, right? And that's because there's more skepticism. And then downstream of that is all the tech changes that, internet service providers have made, and they're using large language models to stop people from sending cold email and all these different things. So and I've talked about this, but like where we're going is we now no longer feel that like mass cold email is the best starting place for most agencies. It doesn't mean that we're never going to do it. Doesn't mean it's not a fit for anybody. But really like what we're focusing on now more is like what's in the 80/20, and 9 times out of 10, that's referrals and strategic relationships, but like done in a better way where you're like actually mapping out who knows who and like looking to get intros and that sort of thing. So I'd like to just put that on your plate. Like what's working for you guys now and kind of how are you approaching new business? Yep.
I think what's working for us is just flawlessly executing the basics, right? Making sure that we're doing our spend well in any of the directories that we're on, right? I think the other thing is too, not giving up on SEO. There's a ton of other agencies I know that have just like kind of trailed off, like, oh, SEO is dead, and they're just that story that's been being told for quite some time. And the other thing is just highly targeting. Right. So find the niches that you're going to have the best conversation with and figure out how to get in those. And a lot of that's speaking. So we do a decent amount of speaking, and some of these are just like small regional events. And ultimately, email. I mean, just having somebody that's just going to email directly into our cold email campaigns last year, like they completely fell off. Like they just absolutely died. So now is more of a one-to-one approach based on specific verticals, as I said, and we're having decent response in doing that. And it's making sure that we say something that is unusual, but also not insulting. I've tried insulting. That didn't work. And that's essentially what's been effective.
Yeah, it's funny how copy and these sorts of approaches like go through changes in the same way that like clothes do or like anything else that's in style or out of style. Where I remember, I don't know, like maybe 10 years ago, the copywriting approach is very like aggressive. It was very much like, here are all these things that suck about you or your company or your website, right?
Oh yeah, dude.
And now it's that that stuff just I don't think it works. I think that a lot of it doesn't really build trust, and it's sort of like, okay, what of it? Like I've got 500 fires right now, and you're pointing out a fire that I don't care about or that I know that I have, but doesn't really mean anything to me. So it's interesting how stuff changes.
And I think if you just start with starting a conversation and you're coming from a place of curiosity, that's going to have the biggest effect. For instance, when somebody like DMs me cold on LinkedIn, my first question is like, "Hey, good to hear from you. Like, what are you selling?" And that directness just gets right to it. I'm like, "Okay, well, how do you do it? And if it's interesting to me, then I'll buy it." I think I'm probably in the rarity there. I don't think most people are probably not going to respond. So I try to look at it like from another angle, just ultimately saying like, hey, here's something that I believe we can help you with. This is somebody that we've helped, before. Does this make sense? And we've gotten leads out of that, right? I mean, conversations. In other cases, yeah, the person's going to go cold, follow up a few times, and go from there. And I think ultimately is especially kind of like with what you do is essentially that's where people are going to move more in a direction of, especially as technology gets smarter. Dude, we're having robots buy from robots, bro. So like, how can you have that human pierce that veil?
Yeah, and I think that looking for these trust-based signals and looking for kind of the old school stuff that's always worked is going to become more valuable. I think there's going to be a higher premium on that, because if everybody has a perfectly timed, well-researched, robot generated message, then nobody really does. And granted, there's going to be people that are better or worse at that game, but overall, there's going to be so much more noise, and there already is. Like I already thought we were at maximum noise, and I think AI is just going to keep turning that up until there's kind of this fog.
Yeah, man. I think another thing too is one of the agencies in Tampa. They were really successful, and I asked one of the owners, "Is like, hey, how have you been getting so many clients? They were winning some really good accounts. Handwritten letters. She had awesome handwriting. I mean, it was like calligraphy type level, right? So like leaning into those things. Mine, it looks like a serial killer is coming after you, right? And I tried. I was like, oh wow, I'm gonna copy what she's doing and do this. I wrote a few, and then I got one to a guy that I got connected with later, and I said, hey man, yeah, I sent you, the thing in the mail or whatever. It was like a really cool postcard with this like German artist and all that. And he's like, yeah, I got that. He's like, I was like, what's the handwriting? He's like, yeah, it wasn't the handwriting. I mean, it was just like one of those awkward kind of things. Like all right, I shouldn't have brought that up. I guess, it's like you send somebody a pet and it died.
How bad is your handwriting? I'm just imagining.
It's not that bad. I mean, it looks like,
imagine looks, just like a kidnap ransom note with all the letters cut out of magazines or something.
It's like, it's like an architect flunky's handwriting. Everything's in all caps, and it's not anything you would want to see on a blueprint. But right. It's definitely bad, man. It's not good. And the better I try to make it, the worse. Like, for instance, I can't even write in lowercase anymore. I mean, yeah, my cursive, no, man, that definitely wouldn't have been on any declaration.
I mean, yeah, in all fairness, mine's pretty bad. It has gotten worse because you don't write as much anymore. It's, just typing now. So it's a skill to keep up. Yeah, I think, tied to that, one of the biggest things that agencies in our group are up against is we're helping them get outbound set up well, and then they're getting to a point of getting warm responses. But a lot of it, and I think that you could probably sympathize being in the app and, dev business and so on, is that there's a real, like, I'm not going to talk to you until I need this thing sort of vibe. But if you're only banking on that timing and just being right place, right time all the time, then you're not like building these relationships and getting people into your world and so on and so forth. Do you have any advice there? Like, when you get that objection, I don't need this thing right now, how do you like to handle it?
I think it's just follow-ups. If you can, so humor is really strong, and that's also based on taste profile. So you got to be really delicate with there. Like, my sense of humor is not necessarily going to translate to everybody else. But I think that is something that we try to use as an advantage. Some people are it's gonna rub them the wrong way, but I think ultimately, all right, that's not your tribe, that's not your audience. Go to the other. So I think if you have that, that's something that we like to use in that. Just really just trying to stay in touch with somebody. We've had for instance, we just started working with a client that we've been nurturing for over 3 years, right? And then that started cold. And ultimately, it's just figuring out ways to, and I hate saying it this way, man, to add value, but that's ultimately what it is. Like, what is something that you're going to do, say, or provide that they're going to find interesting, entertaining, educational, essentially put, some, parentheses around it, valuable, is it. And it's not always easy. It's like, how do you, what's the art of the check-in? When somebody just sends over something that just says, hey, checking in, doesn't always work unless you're following up on a proposal, right? Then it's like, oh yeah, I'm really fucking checking in on this. Like, you said you were going to sign it. Like, where is it at? But I think ultimately, saying, hey, it's been a while, I'd love to catch up. And then maybe even giving some points of something that's exciting that would entice that person to have a conversation really work. I have a guy, for instance, he sends us a ton of business. Awesome guy. And I always try to like do the check-in with him, and he's so cold and flat. He's like, we're good, bro. If I get business, I send it to you. That makes sense for you. I was like, okay, I get it. All right, man. But I think I still have to do that because he's just sent so much over the years, that it's appropriate. So I think ultimately figure out a reason to have a conversation with somebody. That's it. That's all you got to do.
Right. And I also think that, I mean, like you want to minimize the negative reactions in as much as possibly you can, but it's not a bad thing that somebody gives you a neutral or slightly negative reaction. It's in this because you still reminded them that you're there, right? And it's not like you've done anything that's like unprofessional or off kilter or something like that. So I think that's a good point.
I think also, and kind of going back to that comfort thing, like if you're working in sales or especially marketing, like you are partly in the rejection business. You're not trying to create it, but it's just ultimately there. Like, how many of your ads have flopped? How many of your social posts have flopped? How many of your cold emails have flopped, or cold calling? If you've never cold called and you want to see the real wrath of human nature by interrupting someone's focus, pick up the phone and aim for 200 calls a day. Like, that's something that I had to do in my career. And you will, at points, if you're not careful, you will hit yourself, right? But ultimately, you just start learning that, like, okay, like this is just a part of this game. And when you get those wins, it makes them that much sweeter.
Yeah, and I've always said like a lot of sales is trying to make yourself into like a Facebook ads dashboard where it's like if you were just looking at a Facebook ad, you just be like, I guess the ad didn't get as many clicks today. Maybe we'll change the copy. But if it's you making cold calls, or that's less of a thing people are doing, but like whatever it is, proposals, calls, it's harder to do that, right? So the challenge is kind of artificially creating that system so that you're detached from it a little bit.
Yeah, no, and I like that. I like that as a mindset when you have something that you can lean into. One of the ones that always helps me to push into something that's harder is there's two worlds you can live in, right? There's the world of reasons, excuses, and why something's not going to work and whatever, and then there's the world of performance. That's it. So if you want to perform, then the world of reasons and excuses, like that doesn't exist. You have to live in one of these two worlds. And it gives you that binary choice that to me is just a stance of power or empowerment to actually get something done.
Yeah. Can you say more about that? How do you, are there any exercises, rituals, I don't know, kombucha, what that's the joke that you like subscribe to on a daily, weekly basis to stay in more of a performance mode?
I think it's ultimately, I use an app called Strides, and I have all of the things that I know make me a solid performer, right? So one is just publishing. It's publish something, right? And that's probably the one that I fail at the most. So I'm going to start. And that's where kind of like going into like LinkedIn or my, my personal blog or our blog as a company. The other is read at least 20 minutes every day. And when I say read, it's not something that's fiction and that's necessarily like super comforting and enjoyable. Like, read something that's going to make you better at something, right? And for others there, especially in the business community, I recommend my trick there is you have two books. One of those books is a biography, so that you have a story of somebody that's been successful, and you can also hear their failures and whatnot if it's actually told well. and then the other is somebody is another business book that is very specific on something that you want to get better at, right? Is it management? Is it, finance or something? So I have these specific things. Also, get out of bed when the alarm sounds. So that those are my essentially performance, I would say, rituals throughout the day that I have to get these things done. And then once I hit a roadblock, there's one of two things that happens. One is I'm going to journal about it. So it's just instantly like, dude, like ask yourself, like, what is going on? Like, what is this obstacle that I can't get around? And then really dig into why. And then it's that's where I go back to what I just said. It ultimately comes down to that. It's world of reasons and excuses, or that world of performance. And then I look at like, okay, like what is it going to take to perform?
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. There's a couple things that jumped out to me that I like a lot. The first is the looking at biographies. I like biographies a lot too. One, because it's just a better way to understand history than, because if you have a history book, it becomes arbitrary over what to focus on and what not to focus on. Like, is it these years, these other years? You could have a book about U.S. Congress, but then you can make an argument to include just about anything in it, right? Versus a person guides that more. The other thing is that, we're all like deeply mimetic. Like, we want what other people want, and you can't get rid of that. But what you can do is kind of decide who your mimetic models are going to be, right? And if you don't decide on them, then it just becomes random. It's like whoever shows up, whatever pops up on Instagram, whatever like thing you want to try to emulate. So I think I like that about the biography thing. I also like the idea of having two books going at the same time, because you get more than that and you kind of go crazy, I think. I get let's dig into, let's do a little book corner. What do
All
you guys
right.
taste? Yeah.
Dan's or book corner. The two books I'm reading right now. One is I'm reading Richard Branson's biography, which is like 27 hours long in the audio. And the other book is Who Not How. Those are the two that I'm reading. And that the trick is too, by the way, is everybody has a smartphone. Just set a timer for 20 minutes. And like some where I'm like, dude, I don't want to hear about somebody just blow me why this is a better idea. Like, and that's where I'll do like 4 minutes in one book, and then I'm going to do 16 in the other. Right. So I think that's a really good balance. So anyway, those are the two that I'm reading right now. Ted Turner's biography. That's also a pretty gnarly one. And what's the other one too? It's Billy How to Make a Few $1 Billion. Also, a really good book. Yeah, so
Cool.
those are what I finished last month. Which are
I've heard good things about that one.
Yeah.
Sorry to me cut you off. I was going to say the Ted Turner one. Have you gone to the part where he has like the battle with Vince McMahon and that whole saga?
That's in his book.
I don't know if it is, but I know that it's the thing.
No, he made okay. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So
he mentions like just like wrestling as like one note, because I saw the I saw the documentary.
Yeah.
Where they mentioned that. No, man, but some good parts in that book are where he builds this, he becomes a billionaire. He builds this empire. And then he's like, okay, I think the best thing to do is now team up with somebody to get it to the next level. And it's just a really cool story about partnership, where then that's where he then makes a partnership with Time Warner, essentially AOL, and gets totally fucked. Like, It is like, dude, it is so bad. Like, and he was so, I guess, just like warm and welcoming into that. And I've been in those business situations, so I could relate to it. And just he's telling it from truth, man. And he wasn't necessarily the easiest guy to work for. Definitely a performer. Definitely got lucky in some places, but also, man, totally got screwed with that deal.
It's interesting to read biographies like that, and I want to dig into that one because like some of them are just complete. I mean, they're all like have a bit of facade, and the person rewriting their own history, like that's par for the course. But some of them have more of that than others, and others are like people have a good amount of humility and a good amount of like retrospective on their lives because they're like older or whatever. Example, did you ever read Shoe Dog, the Nike one, the Phil
That's
Knight?
great. Yeah.
That was great. Yeah. Because he's just like he's just, you look back on those events that he went through, and it's like all of his competitors combined and then got Congress to basically block his whole company based on like esoteric trade laws from the 1920s. And he like got somebody with 24 hours notice before the hammer was going to come down, and paid a consultant in Congress to like pull some strings, and got his company back. And it's just like, but there's like 500, there's like a dozen of those stories in this book, right?
all of all of these big leaders are these, I would say icons of industry, whether it's Phil Knight or whether it's Ted Turner or any of the others. You could say Bill Gates, as they climb up and really emerge with their companies into that $1 billion status, or trying to get there, or at any phase through, they all get into politics.
Yeah.
It's just the machine, man. You have to do it, or you're going to have somebody that's just going to ruin your dream. And all these guys push through, and I think it's remarkable.
Right. Yeah, and Bezos did that in a huge way, with buying Washington Post and so on. And yeah, so that's something that always happens. To shift gears a little bit with the time we have. So before we put on the recorder, you were talking about considering purchasing an agency. What's going into your consideration, and kind of how are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I think the way that I'm looking at it is, one is like, okay, can it become a forced multiplier? Meaning, you essentially combine two things and it's, exponential. The other thing that I'm looking at is what type of agency to buy. And you can look at like, all right, what are the pieces that I have and like what's missing? Or you could look at it in a way that, all right, I just want more of what I have. And it's not as simple as I thought, just figuring out what direction to go, because you have AI and you have super congested markets, right? Where you never want to be a commodity. And whether you're looking at, all right, it's a WordPress agency, right? So we're going to buy this skill, or it's an SEO agency that's on this, or even ads, right? You just see AI just trickling into all of these different things. So I'm really just trying to parse out, do we want to be industry focused, where we're essentially like wide and thin, or do I want to ultimately just select a specific specialty and go down that vein? I don't have any good answers yet, but if anybody wants to reach out to me and they're selling something, or they're selling their agency, or they might even be in a distressed situation where they want to figure out a deal, man, I would love to talk to any of those people.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it sounds like it's a work in progress. I guess one question is like, how do you see your skill set complementing somebody else's? Like, what are the things that you're looking for that you lack, and vice versa, if that makes sense?
I think ultimately somebody that isn't good, that isn't strong at positioning in sales, right? I think that's a no-brainer. Like if somebody really wants to partner up on that, like those are the things that I've just had, a solid career of doing. There's so many people that are exceptional at what they do, but they are unable to connect with the people they do it for. Right. So that to me is the solid fit. The thing is, a lot of those people, rightfully so, have pride and they're unwilling to give up. They feel like they're going the distance. And there's this precipice that they have to find themselves on, where they realize, I need to have somebody that's going to do this piece. And a lot of the time they've tried to hire, maybe they've done one or two, maybe they even tried to bring in a friend and it didn't work. So that's going to be the perfect fit in any space that I see a solid horizon on.
An agency that is not good at positioning and sales, I don't think that exists, man. I don't think there's anyone. No, I think you'll probably have your pick of the litter. So it sounds like a good thing to aim for. Awesome. So to get into the LinkedIn content, so it's funny that you're like just posting now and making a habit of it and everything, because you had a post that was a lot of fun. That was like a story about a con artist at dinner. Would you be willing to retell it and add more color?
I would, and I don't want to. I mean, I don't know. My mouth is shaped like a foot. I guess a quick story on that. I had a waiter last night that was going over, everything, and he mentioned his name, and I'm going to get into the other story in a minute. And I heard his name as Ratchet, right? But his name was Rich. I didn't realize that that's like a slang term for somebody that's like rude, obnoxious, and annoying. Did you know this?
I think so. I think I've heard, but it's
okay.
Kind of obscure. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. All right. So, my wife knows this. Clearly, looking at this dude's face, he knew that, and I didn't know that. So I was like, "Whoa, what just happened?" Right? Like I didn't know. And then he walks away, and my wife's like, "What the fuck?" She's like, "Why would you say that to him?" And I was like, "Say what?" Like I had no idea. Anyway, so that's why my mouth is shaped like a foot. I just continually walk into things. So going to this dinner. All right, the separate dinner. A good friend of mine who will go unnamed introduces me into this individual, right? And this person had all of this big brand experience, and they wanted to throw an event to get all these big brands together. And I was like, okay, this is gnarly. I have some event experience. I definitely want to get these brands together. We can create this gnarly event. And I was like, let's continue this conversation. So that's meeting one. Then two, we're going out to a dinner. There was a few meetings that we had in between there, like just quick little calls, that I was starting to just get that feeling of like, I don't know, something's not right. You know what I mean? And my father would have this saying. It's quite disgusting, but it's rather fitting here, which is, if it smells like shit, it is shit, right? So ultimately, I was like, all right, I think I need I need to do the double date, and the double date's important, right? Because you get them with their spouse, and if anybody's going to have a partnership of any kind, I highly recommend this. And when you get somebody with their spouse, you can see the interactions. You can see if they're the more dominant one in the relationship or the more passive one in the relationship. You can also see how they talk to each other. You can also see how they talk to the service staff on a hospitality level. So you can learn a lot in this environment. You can see how they cut their food. You can see, and you learn like, okay, like what was their upbringing like? And not only through the dialogue, just based on your, observations, right? The empirical evidence. So so anyway, we get this double date. This person does not bring their spouse, right? So it's like, okay, like they were supposed to, and it's just weird. There was just a very thin excuse. So that was like, all right, that kind of threw things off for a bit. But then I have my wife there. My wife's in tow, right? My partner. And she grabs my wife's ring and starts inspecting it, right? And there was just like weird things, like touching it, like just things that you do not do. And then throughout the dinner, I feel like I'm not giving as much detail as I want. This person is literally chewing with their mouth open. I mean, it's like watching a pony with peanut butter in its mouth. I'm like, what the fuck, man? Like, who chews like this? And the person came drunk. The person continually drank. I mean, ordering drink after drink after drink after drink. Like, I haven't seen somebody drink like this that was outside of a contest at a frat party. Like, it was just unreal, just sucking these things down. And ordering tons of food, right? So I go to the restroom, and then my wife starts asking some questions, right, about the event, because I was at this point saying like, I don't even know what to do with this. This person's entirely too drunk. And then with those questions, so the dinner's over, person doesn't say thank you at all. Like, they just had to witness them chewing like a friggin' savage animal the entire night. I just wanted to get out of there. I was happily to pay the over $600 bill, which I only had, my wife and I had like $125 of. This person just racked it up. There's no thank you. So we get into the car, and I'm at this point, and, I'm like, all right, this, that was awful. But my wife says, I asked her about like, how would she promote an event like this? And she said she would actually, you'll love this. She said, it would be email marketing. And she said, like, what kind of response rates do you get with email marketing? She's like, I get like 95%.
Yeah, that's wild.
It's a lie. Nobody gets a 95%.
No,
that's right. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And then the other thing too was she was asking about how much money essentially how much money that I could throw into this, when that was never a part of the conversation, asking my wife those questions. And then the other tell was, this person said that their bills were really late based on their other business, and essentially that was going to delay things a bit. I think the big win here was how drunk this person got. If they were a true pro, this would not have happened. And here's another kicker. Apparently, there's a documentary, and I don't know if this is true. I haven't validated this, but I heard from another individual that there's a documentary being done about this person and all the scams that they have done. And they got arrested because of that money that they essentially was being tied up. They owe tons and tons of vendors that they have not paid, and that's why they were arrested. So totally got lucky, dodged a bullet there, and I'm thankful that my wife, was able to inspect some things.
Interesting. I have one important question, which is, did this happen in Florida or Chicago?
I can't say
Oh,
that.
because I
I don't. Here's the thing. Like, I think, yeah, I don't want to do business with that person whatsoever. Definitely, there was a con going on, but I'm not looking for the justice. I don't want to ruin anybody. I've been had before. I've been screwed. Um, I had a client stiff me for $80,000, and that person now just got 20 years. That was in Florida. If somebody wants to look
yeah.
that up, that's Olympus Pools, right? But yeah, I take no pleasure in that. It's a part of business. It sucks. It's on to the next one. I'm not looking for justice. I'm looking.
Oh no, I was going to try to make a half-hearted Florida joke. It wasn't to unveil
Oh,
that,
you got to deliver now. All right, yeah, I was in Florida, bro. What do you got?
but it all fell apart. No, sorry you had to go through that, but thanks for letting it be our entertainment and sharing it and everything like that. I guess sometimes it's like, yeah, I guess how do you feel about the value of trusting people and that's
You know, before we were talking at the top of the show, or before we started recording, I yeah, I believe in people, and I love to believe in people, right? I don't think I'm necessarily a sucker, but I can be a sucker. I think I have good instincts. I think that I'm fairly strong at reading people, and I'm a good judge of character. But I'd say a weakness of mine is like I love to see people reach their potential, and I love to believe in people, and I love to be a part of something that has positive energy and is going to be successful, and it's going to add a lot of good or value to an audience, right? And I think in that, I believe there are people out there, unfortunately, that have a different game, and that is a setting that they love, and seeing that in another person. My concern now is, do I change that? Do I stop? You know what I mean? Do I try to like fix that and stop trying to believe in people as much, or stop being so trusting? Um, and I don't know. I mean, that's something I'm looking at. It doesn't mean you don't have contracts in place, but this is the thing. People are like, oh, yeah, you have a contract or whatever. Yeah, you have to enforce that contract. Okay, that's time, energy, and money, right? So that is not the protective shield that everybody thinks it is. I think it's ultimately like, okay, is something going to be worth your time? And then you really just have to have other people around you that are essentially going to give you a second opinion, and potentially protect you from those people. So that's the reflection period that I'm in.
Yeah, I think you have the right approach. I think that if you go too skeptical of everybody, you kind of end up almost selecting for that person because you end up finding those sorts of people everywhere, right? Or you encourage people to be duplicitous because they're like, well, this person thinks I'm duplicitous anyway. Doesn't mean you can't ever get had, but I think that's the right approach. And then otherwise, you end up spending a lot more energy just being skeptical all the time of everyone. You know?
Yeah, and I think we've all met, especially if somebody works with tons of different businesses and lots of different founders. You meet that like overly paranoid, like at a super almost clinical level, where and they might even be brilliant at something, but you're like, dude, like we can't move this thing along because you are so unwilling to share, right? And you could sign non-circumventions, NDAs, and all that, and you're like, all right, dude, you're just going to be a brilliant person that dies in their mother's basement because like this is not going to go anywhere because you're just too afraid to share.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, you lose a lot from that for sure. John, this is always a pleasure. Like we're over time. I think we probably go for another hour. You got a new podcast. Tell us about it.
Yep. The podcast is Business is Bullshit. So it's with a couple buddies of mine, and we essentially talk about the things what we believe is in a very genuine manner that most people are worried to talk about. It almost started as a contest to figure out if we could get canceled. We're only 10 episodes in, or 11 at this point, actually. But yeah, if somebody wants to find us, we're on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, of course, and we're always looking for really good things to talk about in the business realm, and of course, a lot of the conversations involve, business ownership and marketing and sales, and we provide some of those sales tips. And we're looking for sponsors. So, hey, man,
Yeah, you put it out there, man. That's out there in the world. That sounds like fun. I think there's definitely like room for having a more humorous business podcast. There aren't enough ones. I haven't found one that's like truly funny. I've seen humor along the way, but not wanting
Yeah.
your balls.
I don't know if ours is truly funny. That sounds like a standard we haven't hit yet. But
Well, even if you fail at least you're going for it.
no, but dude, it's like I'm sure you've seen like some really bad attempts at humor, and it's what I think one of our goals is to try not to make people that care about us cringe. I think that's it. There's a lot of things that I'll be frank where we tried to not remove them in post, but like I said, my mouth is shaped like a foot, and there's certain things. There's a story I'll tell, and we're like, yeah, we can't tell that, man. That's not safe. Like that's career ending.
Right. Or it'll make you stronger. You just live the life.
Yeah, that's one way to look at it. Yeah, right. Because the next scene, I'm picking up trash on the side of the road, and it's not like a volunteer program.
But you'll be free at that point. Yeah. Yeah, man. Always a pleasure, buddy. Let's do it.
Likewise,
I
buddy.
appreciate it.
Appreciate the opportunity, man. Thanks.